Hey there, welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabrielle Nicolay. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today, Claire Lerner is back. Claire, thank you.
You're well, always happy to join you.
So, tell the people, in case they have never heard of you, which they should have, um, who you are and what you do, please.
So I'm a child development specialist and parent consultant. And while I was a child mental health therapist for a long time, in recent years, which is actually not so recent anymore, maybe 15 plus years, I completely morphed my practice to doing solely parent consultation because I found that we could make much more progress much more quickly and create much more peace and love and joy in families by collaborating with parents and helping parents understand what makes their child tick and what their children need to thrive. And so I spend most of my time doing that. I do a lot of writing about my work and about specifically managing challenging behaviors. And I do a lot of preschool consultation.
Yeah. And if you haven't read Claire's book, what is it
Why is
called?
my child in charge?
Thank you. I was thinking the CEO of my house, but that's a different one.
Well, same idea.
Same idea. Why is my child in charge? Definitely pick that up. And one of the reasons you and I love to chat is because we have very similar overlapping fields and views on children. So today we're going to talk about rigidity or inflexibility, which is, I feel like, and I want to hear from you, this is a term that gets thrown at children when they don't want to do what we want them to do. How do you see rigidity and inflexibility as regards preschool age children in particular?
So I I think yes, I would agree that uh, uh, in the language of a parent or the experience of a parent, the child doesn't want to do something when you want them to do it, and they're digging in their heels, and it feels rigid and defiant writ large. I mean, that's most kids at some point, right, are going to stand their ground on something. But I also see, and this really speaks to who I'm in the weeds with on a daily basis, which are the kids who we think of as highly sensitive. I call them big reactors because that's how they feel to their parents. Those kids who are wired to process their experiences in the world more deeply and therefore are bigger reactors, right? Smallest changes, transitions, things not happening the way they expect is particularly distressing to them more than other kids who are more flexible and adaptable by nature. And so what I've learned about these kids is that because they're so deeply feeling and process things so intensely, they get overwhelmed much more easily than other kids. And a major coping mechanism for them is to try and control everything on the outside. On the inside, they feel so out of control because they've got a system that is over processing and overreacting to everything. And so that can cause a lot of discomfort, right? So they try and control the world around them to cope. So if they walk into the kitchen and they expect to sit next to mom, but their sibling is next to mom, that they're not just acting spoiled. That is an uncomfortable moment for them, and they have to do something to get back to what they expected. They expect a banana to stay whole. So when it breaks, it's, a complete full on meltdown, and no amount of trying to convince them that it's the same banana is going to help because the distress in that moment of the unexpected triggers them, their downstairs brain into high reactivity. And then the floodgates are open and they can't process all you're trying to do to help them reason and accept that it's the same banana.
This is
So
the
I think,
yeah.
yeah.
This is the funniest, not funny. This is a really hard moment for folks when when they want to explain. I love the banana example because it feels like such a nothing burger, right? It's like your banana is now in two pieces, no big deal. Well, actually, if I'm three and I wanted it to be in one piece and now it's in two pieces, that is actually the biggest deal that I can possibly think of in this moment. And no amount of talking is going to make that not be true. And so I hear exactly what you're saying in terms of like these big reactors, because they're usually riding really close to that breakdown line anyway. And so this is just like the next little thing. I wanted to jump in with the kid sitting next to sibling is sitting next to mom. In the moment that that happens, and this is from the speech and language side, they do not have the words to go back and say, but I thought when I was coming into the room that I was going to be able to sit next to you in the chair that I was thinking earlier, mom and dad, that I was going to sit in. Right? And the reason I'm making it so long is so people can see, like, yeah, that's not available.
Right,
Right?
exactly.
3-year-olds, as much as they sound very coherent, they're not. They don't have that thought capacity yet. Yeah. And so then all they've got is this behavior.
Right. And I think, right, you're raising something that's so important, which is that all of these behaviors are multi-determined. There's so many factors that are, one is temperament, right, which is what I just spoke to. Then you spoke to the developmental piece of the puzzle, right, which is what kids have access to. So especially if you think about a child who, let's say, does have a, not just by age, we don't expect them to have it, but maybe they're 5 or 6, but they have a language delay. Like that's an important piece of the puzzle. But here's my thought process about how to help parents solve that problem, regardless of what all the contributing factors are, because sometimes we don't know everything that's going on in a child's brain. A lot of it is doing the detective work to put together the pieces of the puzzle that help us understand what was so challenging for that child. So in that situation, let's say we have a child and there isn't a developmental challenge, but they're a fierce kid and they want to control their world. And you add to that the contextual factors, sibling rivalry, attention, wanting to be the most important person to the mom, wanting to be attached to her by the hip. Like all of that is going on when that child walks in and is surprised, right? So my
Time of day.
time of day, right? All of this, like what else happened in their day. But let's stick with, like, in my world, this kind of behavior happens all the time.
Mm-mm.
A lot of times, like, of course, if a child's more tired or they've been sick or a parent has been traveling, there's always going to be those contextual variables. But in my world, this happens quite often with these kids. Like, this is what happens. Not just the chair thing, but they get up and they see that their sibling has already gone downstairs and they're like, I go down first. And they literally are demanding that their parent go back upstairs with the baby so they can be first, right? This is the kind of thing that parents are contending with, which looks so irrational and spoiled. And it's hard not to have those, those messages playing in your head. But it's not what's going on. I think that's the important thing we're saying, is that these children don't set out to be controlling fascist dictators. But that's how it feels to their parents. And what happens is, if that's your interpretation, this child is sucking the oxygen out of this family. They have to control everything. It's not fair. They have very negative feelings about the child, and they almost always then react in very harsh, punitive, shaming, rejecting ways, which only exacerbates the behavior. That's the problem, is that those behaviors just increase the child's agitation and dysregulation.
Yep. Yep.
And if they are feeling jealous, it only makes them feel worse that I'm not the more loved child. So it plays right into all of their vulnerabilities. So what I'm working on with parents, to my very long-winded way of answering your question, is it might go something like this. Gabrielle, I know you were expecting to sit next to mommy. I totally get that. It's really hard for you when that can't happen. So the first step is, Psych 101. You can't, be on Instagram without knowing that, yes, like validation of feelings is very important to acknowledge their desire. We're never trying to talk kids out of their feelings. That just gets them to dig in their heels further and fight you on every point. And then you set an important limit and boundary that creates the opportunity for them to learn to be adaptable. So if you're like, which many of my families do understandably, as one dad called it, the parenting path of least resistance, the younger kid or the kid who's more flexible, they just have them move to take everybody out of their misery and have a nice meal. And I totally get that. The problem is all that does is reinforce that behavior and the entitlement that that child wants, but doesn't need. They want it, but it's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for a child to suck all the oxygen out of the family or to be the lightning rod. So the limit is critically important because then what you do is say, sometimes you're going to get to sit next to me and sometimes you're not. And that is going to happen. I know that's really hard for you. I totally get it, but that is going to happen. So your two great choices are to choose another chair. You can choose wherever you'd like to sit, but we're not going to, we're not going to have, Joey move. You will get your turn tomorrow night. If you need to be upset about that, no problem. I'm not asking you to like it, but that's our plan because it's a mommy daddy job or a mommy job to have people take turns. So you're totally empathetic but you have to set the limit because the limit is what scaffolds the adaptation.
Yes. And you said it, it's so important. They don't have to like it. I think so often we fall victim to I want my child to, I mean, underneath all the underneath is I want my child to validate my decisions so that I can feel good about myself, which is like, oops, I didn't mean to do that, but that is what's playing out often, yeah.
Well, exactly. That is a major factor. Plus, we're trying to avoid the meltdown. So we're hoping against hope to somehow convince our child this is a good plan so that, so that we can avoid the meltdown because the meltdown is so unpleasant, but it's just not a realistic expectation. The child say, "Oh, that's a really good idea. You know what, I really should put the iPad away so I can do something more edifying with my mind and my body." Or you know what? My sibling also deserves being next to mommy. So I'm just going to take my deep breaths and I'm going to go sit. So it's just not the way the kids work. And the more you try to convince them to agree with your limit, the more fodder for a power struggle there is because these are very clever kids and they know they're like, oh, mom doesn't want to feel bad about this. So she's trying to get me to agree with it. But as long as I throw up all these obstacles, then she won't implement it because she's waiting for me to agree. So you end up in this vacuum of this terrible, terrible power struggle that ends with parents having such negative feelings about their kids and kids not learning resilience and learning to be demanding and learning that they are the lightning rod in their family. That is what's detrimental to families. That dynamic.
And
Parents feel so negative about their kids and kids feeling shamed. It's not the limit. The limit is a loving limit, just like you would say to a child, or I would now that I've learned, is I would say, I know you hate when your banana breaks. I totally get it. I'm not going to give you another banana, but I'm happy to help you figure out a way to feel comfortable with that banana. I can give you a knife. You can cut it in pieces. We can make faces with it. I can give you some peanut butter to a sandwich, and I'm not going to give you a new banana. So your two great choices are to figure out how to enjoy the banana, or you don't have to enjoy the banana. You don't have to eat the banana, but I'm not getting you a new banana. And
and
that's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, what this does, okay, so what you're describing is very, very difficult the first few times you do it. But what we are teaching brains, I know you know this is for the audience, right? what we're teaching brains when we do that is I can survive a meltdown. I can survive the unpleasant emotion that I feel when something unexpected happens. And what that leads to, ideally, in this kind of construct that we're talking about, is more flexibility. Because I know that I can handle my big feelings because I have had to live through my big feelings. And so that kind of trying to stave off the meltdown, it can backfire in that way, where now kids are like afraid to feel their big feelings, and they're like, oh, this is not comfortable. Let me distract, or negotiate, or whatever, avoid. And parents are doing the same thing, and unwittingly not kind of contributing to their child's emotional development.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. They need to experience that they can tolerate the upset. And that's why, like, I've over the years, I've developed all of these like mantras or mindsets, or because I find they really help parents. And in this realm, there's a couple that I find are really important, which is one is that limits are loving and they scaffold adaptation. If we go back and think about our greatest growth or how we learned to manage difficult things, almost always there was a limit or something that we confronted that forced us to have to work something out, have to problem solve. And that's what built that resilience and grit and the comfort with discomfort. And so one of the big mantras is limits are loving, don't fear the limit. Limits are they're opportunities. They're opportunities for children to develop that grit and that ability to be flexible, which is so critical. The other one is to constantly remind yourself that just because your child wants something doesn't mean they need it. That's really, in a lot of ways, I see the intersection of our work is your kid is going to want a lot of things. They're going to want to sit next to you. They're going to want 50 books at bedtime. They're going to want endless sweets. They're going to want endless, screen time. That's in their DNA, is to just want, and there's nothing wrong with it. Up to decide what do they need.
Stop there. There's nothing wrong with it. That's actually how our brains are designed. They are designed to want things, and learning how to tolerate and discriminate wants and needs and nice to haves and necessaries, that is the work of maturing and growing into an adult, actually. Right? And 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, and even most 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 22-year-olds are not particularly good at this yet. And again, the skill set is different for the older kids, but in the early years, part of the reason I love working with families who have young kids is you have the opportunity to set up the bowling alley with guardrails that make a lot of sense, so that when the container gets bigger, as kids get older and they get more freedom and they get more responsibility and they are doing more things, they've got a solid foundation.
Yeah.
It starts in early childhood. It absolutely
Yeah, I mean,
does.
it really is the gift that keeps on giving. And, because I'm in the trenches with families, I hear these stories every day that once parents get comfortable with clear limits and they tolerate it, the most critical piece is tolerating the upset. Because almost always when I'm working with a family and we're peeling back the layers of like these tricky dynamics, at the heart of it, the obstacle to like they all like if I say, well, what limit do you think should be set? What do you think your child needs, right? Well, we know he doesn't need a box of wheat thins or gummy bears before dinner. Like what he needs is a healthy growing food, mostly for dinner. So of course he's going to want that. Who wouldn't want that? So you have to say to yourself, what like wanting those things, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And when you get comfortable saying to your child, I totally get it. I would also love to eat, a box of graham crackers for dinner. I don't because it's not healthy. My job is to give you a healthy dinner. I can't let you have gummy bears right before dinner. So I'm going to be, it's too hard. It's too tempting. So I'm going to be your helper. And you put a lock on the pantry and you say, I'm not asking you to like this decision. I don't expect you to like it. Why would you like it? But that's my mommy job. And that's how I'm going to help you fill your body more with growing foods. And as you do that and you get and then you say if you need to melt down, no problem. If you need to be upset about it, like no, that's totally fine. That's when things start to change.
And it's partially because I mean, there's always a lot going on, but that's partially because now the adult is creating safety and opportunity for success. Because in your pantry gummy bear example, if I, the child, which I will do, go to the pantry while my parent is not looking, because of course that happens. You can't like be watching your kid all the time. And I get the gummy bears and then I get yelled at or whatever happens. Now that's experience with failure. And when we can avoid experience with failure is necessary, but being set up to fail is not.
Well, yeah, I mean
Right?
that you're making a very important point and one that I I'm talking a lot with parents about and here's this is a video. So because I'm not seeing kids in person, I
Mm-hmm.
really need to understand what makes them tick because it's not a one size fits all approach. I really need to understand the child's development and temperament and what these tricky interactions look like.
Mm-hmm.
So now I get a lot of video from parents, and these lovely, wonderful parents have this extremely feisty 3.5-year-old. And here's what the video shows. She's hungry. She wants dinner and they're saying we're about to put dinner on the table and she's like I want pretzels and they're like no Sadie we're not having pretzels and she's like I want pretzels no Sadie we're so this is going on for a while then Sadie creeps closer and closer keeps looking back at them she's getting closer to the little closet where the pretzels are and you can hear them going Sadie we told you remember they're waiting and waiting hoping that she is going to follow the limit and she's getting more dysregulated she finally opens it up and they're still saying Sadie, and then she grabs them. Then she runs. Then, of course, the dad gets really triggered and he's chasing after her, and the whole thing explodes. It becomes physical. And I share it because really, like, that's a great example. I would I would say that what gentle parenting looks like in that situation is Sadie says, I'm hungry. I know, sweetie, I hear you. I can give you something healthy to eat while I'm making dinner. I call it now appetizers, and that's a whole nother talk about what to deal about food issues. But
Oh, and
Sadie,
definitely make it be frozen peas straight out of the freezer in a bowl on the table because
oh,
that
okay,
is
love it.
no
Okay,
prep, perfectly healthy. It's cold, it can be crunchy. So there's all of that sensory
okay,
stuff going on. No
yeah,
prep. Just
we
saying.
need, okay, that I need that conversation with you because this is a big issue. But for
Okay.
like this, so in the perfect world, they would offer her something. And also, what would happen is she would say no and she would start. So it's that moment where I would say, I know, Sadie, I know you're thinking about pretzels, and pretzels are delicious. They're not an option now. I'm going to be a helper. They would have just locked the pantry door and let her have her meltdown and say one validating, I know this is a difficult moment. You're a great kid having a difficult time. I can't wait to have dinner with you and you just keep moving. You let her know, we feel you.
Yeah.
This limit is not harmful to you. We understand that you're making it sound like it's harmful, but in the parent, you're saying, I'm being such a loving parent right now. I'm setting a loving limit. I'm not going down the rabbit hole with her. I'm being totally calm and validating. I'm not talking to her to death about her feelings. One validating statement. I know that's a tough moment, not trying to talk to her about her big feelings in that moment. It almost always escalates the kid. You give her space, you get up, you say, dinner's ready, you go to eat. And what I find is that when parents keep moving in a loving way, they're not correcting her. They're not shaming her. They're not lecturing her. The child ultimately gets up and adapts because there's no other option. They're not going to get the pretzels. And that's when you start to see the adaptation.
Yeah. And that's parents leading by example, right? Big feelings are tolerated here, behaviors are not. Not all behaviors, right, are tolerated here, and we're going to shape those. And I'm going to give you as few opportunities as possible to fail at that, and as many opportunities to succeed. In other words, I am going to prevent you from sneaking the pretzels, because I know they're not subtle, these kids, right?
Yeah.
Like you can see them coming, and they're wicked smart. And it's hard to be half a step ahead of them sometimes. And sometimes parents are maxed out at the end of a work day, and we didn't figure out what was for dinner, and now everybody's scrambling. And so much grace for families who are, stressed and overtired and overworked and all of that. And there is a small uncooked brain in your house that needs tending. Is sort of how I think of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great synopsis.
Yeah.
And that's all the mind shifting, that's so important. I find that once parents really say these mantras, I have a great kid having a difficult moment. They need me to be their rock. They need me to move them through this difficult moment. They don't need a lecture. They don't need correction. They don't need shaming. They're having a hard time getting into the car. When it's time to get in the car, I'm going to either give them an opportunity to move into the car on their own, or I'm going to be a helper. I mean, you've heard me, say that a gazillion times, but it really we started with inflexibility, but almost always the challenging behavior parents are facing includes an element, right, of inflexibility, rigidity. I don't want to even say it because it's going to send in a whole path, but this whole idea of demand avoidance
I
and
wanted
kids who
to
are,
jump in on that for just a
okay.
second, because, and here's why. We have been talking about kids who are temperamentally reactive, right? We've got those big reactors. What we have not been specifically talking about are kids who are autistic and kids who are in nervous system burnout. And I really want to be clear about who it's for, what we're talking about is for. This approach of two good choices, loving limit, scaffolding, 100 million% yes. Except when we've got a nervous system that is completely fried. And often, sometimes, we get to that fried nervous system because we haven't had those loving limits, right? So we can often head off burnout. But once we've reached burnout, we need a new set of tools. And so I want to flag it. That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
We will do it sometime in terms of like, well, how do I know if my kid's in nervous system burnout? It's like a whole other set of questions. But I thank you for flagging the demand avoidance, right?
And it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I don't want to add to it because I know parents are so confused once they start tooling around Instagram and they're getting so many different messages. And, you know, that's led me to, when I give guidance, I peel back all the layers and explain like how I'm making sense of the situation at hand based on their child's development, their temperament, all the contextual factors, and therefore why I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting so they can make an informed decision. But I will say that the whole demand avoidance and has become very, very confusing to parents, to your point, like figuring out what is the appropriate expectation. Um, and it's not sort of a certified diagnosis at this point. We know a lot of kids who are on the spectrum, often kids who have a lot of anxiety, often kids who are highly sensitive and big reactors. They are more prone to having knee-jerk reactions, to feeling like people are trying to control them. And it's to different degrees, and you do have to figure out what is the right expectation for my child, what is the right limit. And I do want to acknowledge that can be very hard, and that often is where talking to somebody, a professional, to really try and do that detective work to figure out what is the right approach for my child is critically important.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Inflexibility and so much more. We're gonna put a pin in it there. You and I talk all
Okay.
day.
I know it's never enough.
It's never enough. I always say to people, like, my special interest, child development, right? Like,
Right, exactly.
yeah,
Okay, good one. Good one.
yeah, good one.
Yeah, okay, I've got that too.
If people want to learn more about you, Claire, how do they do that?
Really, probably the best thing is to go to my website, which is lernerchilddevelopment.com. I've got hundreds and hundreds of free blogs and a free newsletter. Instagram, I do a lot on Instagram, but mostly telling stories and trying not to pontificate, but peeling back the layers so people can see what it looks like and then figure out whether that applies to them. That's what I'm trying to do. And I have a new book coming out in the fall
Oh,
on
congratulations.
it's on all my work in the trenches with big reactors.
Nice.
Story after story, all the stuff we talked about. There's an entire chapter on controlling and inflexibility, perfectionism, sore losing, low tolerance for frustration and correction, social issues, like all the sort of the key attributes and challenges that the kiddos I see tend to face, and how I've helped parents navigate that and sort of find a way to thread this seemingly elusive needle of being sort of the loving, connected, gentle parents while also scaffolding and setting those limits and boundaries to help their kids, thrive.
Yes. Oh my gosh, can't wait.
Yep. And it's
Congratulations.
called Big Reactors.
Hey, there you go. All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to that fall 2025.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have you back on
Okay. That would be great.
if not before.
Okay. Whenever.
Claire Lerner, thank you.
All right. Take care.